I'm a firm believer that you have to trust people at some point, unless you just write them off. So if you're going to write them off, then you lock them up for the rest of the year, and then it's a huge expense to society in all sorts of ways. So that's why I think, we really do have to consider, and this is not just about, criminals and prisoners. I think it's all about, in daily life. How do you deal with a situation where somebody's done something that you don't like? Let's take your own home, your own children, or even your partner. What do you do? Forgiveness is difficult, especially if you're a victim. And that, I worry about retribution. I worry about, the way in which people react. Tabloid reactions to, all sorts of incidents lead to entrenchment, and it leads to bitterness, and it leads to an inability to connect. And so you have to overcome all that. And and some prisons do it and some don't. So some make an effort and some don't. It's dependent on the people again. Juries make mistakes. Juries, ordinary people, come along and they sometimes convict somebody who's innocent and acquit somebody who's guilty. But that's part of the whole process of making a judgment. So, and because juries have come up with, in criminal cases anyway, verdicts which I thought, oh, that's not what I thought was going to. And I've slowly decided that I'm actually probably the worst person to decide whether I believe in what they're saying to me. Obviously I'm critical I look at it in a critical way in order to tease out whether, they're fully convincing about what they're saying. So I'll obviously put other points to them. And I like, as I say, I like to identify with them, so I understand where they've come from. And I want to commit myself to the identification process. But at the end of it, making the final judgment of whatever the case is, let's a criminal case, the obvious one. Are they guilty, or are they innocent? That's a big question. Cameras into court. Have your camera in a courtroom. So you don't have to ask these questions because you will see what actually happens and why it takes a bit of time, to get to the truth. Unraveling the truth isn't like peeling an onion in literal sense. It takes longer than 5 minutes to do this. And if you're going to do it effectively, you've actually got to prepare it. Now, I'm not saying the system's perfect. It's not. And they have tried over the last 10, 20 years to speed it up, to make people, force people to take decisions more quickly and focus and leave out stuff that isn't really relevant. And of course that's called case management, and that's much attributable to an individual judge decide, oh, this is taking too long, So it's not satisfactory, but on the other hand, I think I would prefer to err on the side of getting it right rather than cutting corners, because if you cut corners like Bloody Sunday, you have a report out years ago which is a whitewash. You have to do it all over again. And I'm really angry about this because I spent my life doing human rights work, is that slowly this whole, the fabric of human rights is being totally eroded. Not just by the present government, but the one before that and the one before that. It doesn't matter whether it's a Tory or a Labour or a coalition or Lib Dem, whatever. The actual, as it were, parameters within which we all operate, if you like, conventions on human rights which really matter to everybody. If I say them, you'll say, can anybody argue? They are arguing about withdrawing from the European Convention. We're talking about the right to life, privacy, association, fair trial. These are pretty basic concepts. What is interesting for me is that these people, at the moment of greatest need for them, need to know the truth about what happened. They have stood up and said, for the benefit of the rest of us, actually, you have to ask the questions, you have to be persistent, you have to have courage, all those three things. And if you've managed to combine all of those, look what we've managed to do. And in the case of Stephen Lawrence, obviously his parents have managed to bring about considerable institutional change within the police, in the sense that there's a mindset that's shifted because they've said, look, through the Macpherson inquiry, institutional racism, it's got to end. Well, it still hasn't ended, her campaign hasn't ended, but it's it's actually raised it all above the parapet, and people now recognise what it is. Marshiness, river safety's changed as a result of the parents there coming together and saying, this must not happen again. That's what they want. They say, we don't want other people to go through what we've gone through, so this is what we've done. Bloody Sunday Families, same thing, and Hillsborough's yet to come. So all these examples, and there are many, many more, that's just the most obvious ones that I've been involved in. And about 4 years later, this publishing company rang up and said, we're publishing your book as a children's book. And I go, oh, wow, thank you very much, you know. So it went into public libraries, it went all over the place, became actually, for some schools, because it's the hero is black, and that was rare, to get a black boy as a main character. And the story itself, it's like Jonah the whale, he gets swallowed by a whale and all that stuff. So it's partly, not exactly biblical, but there's the resonance there.